Good morning and welcome to the Breakfast Rundown with me, Zulfick Farzan. Well, Sri Lanka was a point of discussion at the IMF and World Bank Group annual meetings in Washington, D.C. last evening, with some analytical corners also using Sri Lanka's debt crisis and recovery as well as the progress towards stability as a prime example in the current context. Now, I'll have those details later on. But first, let's switch to the local arena of something that we just received. Now, a shooting had taken place inside the Ratmalana railway yard this morning. Now, this is located in Mount Lavinia. According to police reports, 5 suspects had entered the premises in an attempt to steal property from the Ratmalana railway yard and had also assaulted the railway security officials as well. Now, during this altercation, one of the suspects was injured by a gunshot fired by one of the security officers. Additionally, one of the security officers was also injured in the assault by the suspects. The injured suspect and the security officer have been admitted to the Kalubowila hospital for treatment. And the remaining suspects had fled the scene and are currently at large. Now, the postal voting for the parliamentary election is set to take place soon, and the parliamentary election, where almost 17 million people will be heading to the polls, is on the 14th of November. Now, starting today, all postal workers' leave has been cancelled until the 14th of November. That's election day. Deputy Postmaster General Ratmalana announced that this decision was made to ensure smooth operations for the upcoming general election. In related news, the secure packages containing postal ballots for the general election will be handed over to the Postal Service today. Deputy Postmaster General Ratmalana confirmed that all necessary preparations have been made to receive these packages containing the postal ballots. Now, moreover, all campaigning activities for the Alpetiya Pradesh Sabha election will conclude at midnight tonight. The Election Commission has announced that campaigning will be prohibited from midnight until the results are declared on the 26th. The Election Commission has notified all parties, candidates and independent groups contesting the election to cease all campaigning activities after midnight. The Alpetiya Pradesh Sabha election is scheduled to be held on the 26th of this month. Now, something interesting is developing in Sri Lanka, that is, the prices of coconuts are on the rise. Now, consumers are expressing significant distress due to the record high increase in coconut prices in Sri Lanka. Now, in some areas, a single coconut is being sold for around 200 rupees. Consumers are urging the government to intervene and reduce the prices of coconuts. Newsfirst reached out to the Coconut Development Board for more information on this matter. Deputy Director Nayani Arachi stated that the price surge is due to a decrease in the coconut harvest this year. She indicated that this situation might persist until April next year. Meanwhile, the Coconut Development Board announced the launch of a mobile sales initiative to provide coconuts at subsidized prices to consumers. Now, this will commence from today. The first phase of this initiative will focus on the municipal areas of Colombo, Sri Jayawardhanapura Kotte and Kaduwela. The board also expects to supply 15,000 coconuts to these areas and to these markets weekly on a consumer demand basis. Now, these coconuts will be sold to consumers between the prices of 100 rupees and 120 rupees. Now, another growing health concern has arisen in Sri Lanka. Yesterday, we reported to you about the surge in dengue cases in the country, where over 1,800 cases were reported in just 21 days in October. Now, another growing concern, diabetes. Professor Dr. Mandika Wijayratna from the Sri Lanka Medical Association has highlighted an alarming finding from a recent study on diabetes in Sri Lanka. According to the research, 25% of Sri Lankans over the age of 40 are diagnosed with diabetes. This means 1 in every 4 individuals in this age group is affected by the disease. Additionally, a similar percentage of the population is in the pre-diabetic stage, indicating a high risk of developing diabetes in the near future. Now, this trend shows no sign of decrease. Instead, it is expected to rise. In urban areas like Colombo and Jaffna, the situation is even more severe, with 33% of the population over 40 being diabetic. This translates to 1 in every 3 individuals in these urban areas. Now, Dr. Ratmalana has emphasized the gravity of the situation, noting that diabetes prevalence in Sri Lanka is a significant and growing health concern. At the same time, the grade 5 scholarship examination led to controversy following the leak of 3 questions from one of the question papers. Now, the matter was also taken to the Supreme Court. Now, in a related incident, an investigation has now been launched regarding the issue of the Tamil exam papers for grade 8 and 9 students in the schools in the Central Province. Nihal Alahakon, the Director of Education for the Central Province, announced that a special committee comprising 5 members has been appointed to look into the matter. The issue arose on the 21st of this month when the Central Province Department of Education provided identical Tamil exam papers to the Sinhala medium students in both grade 8 and grade 9. As a result, a new Tamil exam paper will now be administered to grade 9 students on the 25th of this month to conduct the second term examination. Now, this is according to the Education Director. Now, at the beginning of the program, I mentioned to you that Sri Lanka was a point of discussion at the IMF and World Bank Group annual meetings in Washington, D.C. Now, one of the points that was raised was Sri Lanka's debt sustainability. Now, at the G24 press briefing yesterday, following the G24 ministers and governors meeting that took quite a long time, that meeting took quite a long time in Washington, D.C. And following that meeting, a press conference was convened by the heads of the G24, including the chair, who's also the finance minister of the Philippines. Now, the G24 says that Sri Lanka has made significant progress over the past 2 years. Dr. Iyabo Marsha, she is the director of the G24. Now, she was speaking to reporters in Washington, D.C. and called for the establishment of frameworks that allow middle-income countries to negotiate with their creditors similar to the common framework that currently exists for low-income countries.
Thank you. I'm going to go online with the question I just received from Zulfick Farzan, Newsfirst, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, a member of G24, is currently making attempts to emerge out of economic crisis. What can you tell us about the G24 position to support countries like Sri Lanka, and also for the island nation to secure financial facilities at reasonable condition? Mr. Chair, and maybe Ayabo? Yeah.
Yes. I would say that Sri Lanka has come a long way from where it was 2 years ago. The last IMF Article 4 assessment does show that growth is picking up, the fiscal buffers are coming up, and also import duties are rising. So that indicates that the country is making some recovery. As for the position that the G24 takes on this issue, the way it affects Sri Lanka most is on the debt sustainability issue. And so what we are calling for is that countries, especially middle-income countries, should also have a framework, a forum where they can negotiate with their debtors. As it is now, the common framework only works for low-income countries. Only low-income countries are part of the common framework, but middle-income countries can be part of another forum called the Global Sovereign Debt Resolution Roundtable, which is not really an association, an organization that delivers any form of debt relief. It just fosters common understanding. So that's what we're calling for. We want very timely, very comprehensive reduction in debt for countries, and also for both middle and low-income countries to qualify. So that is where I see it working out. If things work out and the discussion in that area picks up quite fastly, then we could see the likes of Sri Lanka and maybe even Lebanon and a few other countries benefiting from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the floor. Maybe I'll take one question from the side or come back to you. I've seen your hand, sir, on the third row. Fourth row, yes.
Well, that was a press conference from the G24 on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank Group annual meetings. Another key development from yesterday is the release of the World Economic Outlook from the IMF. The IMF says that the global battle against inflation has largely been won, even if price pressures persist in some countries. Now, Pierre-Olivier Gorincas, Economic Counselor and Director of the Research Department of the IMF, presenting the World Economic Outlook on Tuesday, said the prediction is that headline inflation will fall to 3.5% globally by the end of next year, slightly below the average during the 2 decades before the pandemic.
Thank you, Jose, and good morning, everyone. Now, let me start with the good news. The battle against inflation is almost won. After peaking at 9.4% year-on-year in the third quarter of 2022, we now project headline inflation will fall to 3.5% by the end of next year. In most countries, inflation is now hovering close to central bank targets. Now, inflation came down while the global economy remained resilient. Growth is projected to hold steady at 3.2% in 2024 and 2025. The United States is expected to cool down, while other advanced economies will rebound. Performance in emerging Asia remains robust, despite a slight downward revision for China to 4.8% in 2024. Low-income countries have seen their growth revised downwards, some of it because of conflicts and climate shocks. Now, the decline in inflation without a global recession is a major achievement. Much of that disinflation can be attributed to the unwinding of the unique combination of supply and demand shocks that caused the inflation in the first place, together with improvements in labor supply due to immigration in many advanced countries. But monetary policy played a decisive role, keeping inflation expectations anchored. Now, despite the good news on inflation, risks are now tilted to the downside.
Well, that was Pierre-Olivier Gorincas from the IMF Research Department, highlighting how a global headline inflation will drop to 3.5% in the coming year. Now, Sri Lanka's delegation to the IMF and World Bank Group annual meetings is led by none other than Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Vivusinghe, and he is accompanied by Finance Secretary Mahinda Sirivardhana. Now, yesterday they met with Kristalina Georgieva, the IMF's managing director, and later on met with several other officials from the IMF as well to discuss Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process and debt sustainability. Now, on the other side, another global forum is convening. That is BRICS. BRICS 2024 is taking place in Kazan, Russia. Now, BRICS involves Brazil, India, Russia, China and South Africa, and several other new additions to BRICS, while Sri Lanka will be formally making its request to become a member of BRICS and the new development bank during the Kazan summit. Now, Sri Lanka is represented by Aruni Vijayawardena, the country's the country's foreign secretary, and she will also address the Leaders Summit on behalf of Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake. Now, relations between Russia and China has reached such a high level that they can be used as an example by other nations. Now, President Vladimir Putin said during his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan. Both Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin met in Kazan yesterday for bilateral talks. The two leaders met ahead of the main event. Xi has praised China's bilateral relations with Russia and said that over the past decade they had come a long way and reached an unprecedented level. The two global powers make a great contribution to defending international justice, he said. China is Russia's biggest trade partner, and the economic cooperation between the two nations has been steadily growing despite the unprecedented Western sanctions. Now, the Russian-Chinese trade volume amounted to $82 billion over the 9 months of this year, according to the Russian media citing the Chinese customs data. At the same time, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met with Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of the main summit in Kazan. Prime Minister Modi said he wanted the war in Ukraine to be resolved peacefully and quickly as he met with Vladimir Putin at the annual BRICS summit. Well, the both leaders embraced each other ahead of their discussions in Kazan. The three-day gathering held in the Tatarstan capital Kazan is the biggest international event to take place in Russia since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And observers say Putin hopes to project the alliance as a counterweight to the Western hegemony. Putin, in his turn, hailed what he called Russia and India's privileged strategic partnership and vowed to build further ties. New Delhi has walked a diplomatic tightrope since the full-scale war broke out in Ukraine, pledging humanitarian support for Kiev while avoiding explicit condemnation of Russia's invasions. Well, it will be interesting to see what kind of outcome will be reached at the BRICS summit, as well as these global powers meet to discuss massive global issues as well. Now, since this morning, many areas in Sri Lanka experienced a heavy downpour. The Meteorological Department has issued a weather forecast warning indicating that the western, Sabaragamuwa, southern, northwestern and northern provinces as well as the Kandy and Nuwara districts are likely to experience fairly heavy showers exceeding 75 millimeters in some of those areas. Now, showers or thunder showers can be expected in other parts of the island during the evening or at night, while some areas will receive heavy rainfall of around 75 millimeters of rain. At the same time, the Met Department is issuing a warning for strong winds that can be accompanied during the heavy downpour. In addition, the Met Department is also urging the general public to exercise caution and minimize the damages caused by lightning-related accidents. Well, that brings an end to this morning's edition of the Breakfast Rundown. Until I see you again next time, tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Take care and God bless.